Welcome, everyone. It's Irene Lyon here, and I'm going to talk a lot over the next 90 minutes about my future Scientuitive Practitioner Track. And if you're here watching the recording, thank you for coming in afterwards. Of course, we've got all our live folks here now. Just a reminder for those that are popping in right now, we're going to do Q&A towards the end. A lot of questions will probably be similar, and so I will answer as I go along. And I do have some questions that have been submitted, and I think they might cover most of what your questions are. At the end of the Q&A that I cover that have been submitted, if you still have a question for me around this future Scientuitive track, then we'll take the questions in the chat. All right, cool, thank you. So what I was about to do is just introduce one of my helpers, assistants, managers, Bonnie, whom is newish to our team, but Bonnie really came in and was within our first development phase, the beta phase, and I'll talk about that last year, this time really, and through the whole year. Bonnie, do you want to just let everyone know where you are, what you do for the company, and
Sure.
something maybe personal that's
Sure.
fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am in Vancouver, Canada, and the leaves are floating down here right now. It's very pretty. I came to Team Lion about a year and a half ago as an entrepreneur myself and a strategist to support Irene and the team in some development with new procedures, new team development, all sorts of areas of the company. And then I've stuck around, so I'm here full-time with Irene and the team, both shaping our team in who is doing what across all the departments of the company and in these programs that Irene's been working on. So those of you that I am familiar with and saw in the beta that Irene just spoke to, you would have seen me show up and have communications with you as I was both supporting the structure of how we started, but also watching, observing, and being in connection and conversation with Irene of how we can continue with this. So my role at this stage with the company is a few facets, but managing and supporting our administration team and managing and supporting across the different projects and departments of the company, and working with Irene and a couple of other key people in how we will shape and deliver what's to come and what Irene's going to speak to today. So I'll continue to be a key contact for this next while when questions come in and as we get started with this track that Irene's going to speak to. And personally, I think what's a good one? I went dancing this weekend and it was so much fun. And that's a really great, yeah, that's a good one for me. So
That's a good
share
one.
the joy of my movement. And yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Bonnie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I often joke in a good way. Do you remember in elementary school? Some of you might remember this. There was the receptionist, whoever that she knew. Usually it was a she. She knew every single student, when their appointments were, where they would leave their coats. You know, there was always that one key receptionist that kind of had a pulse on all the students. Bonnie kind of has been that for the company, but also for when we did the beta the last year. So I cannot do all of this on my own. And there's an incredible team of people who help me in back-end areas that you'll never hear about. And in essence, everyone on the team is interested in this nervous system work, making sure it gets out there, making sure we have the capacity to sustain and be sustainable. And a reason why I'll sort of shift gears into this Scientuitive track, the reason why this has been taking a while to get to is I need really good help so that I'm not in the weeds anymore and, you know, updating websites and writing copy for little things and all the little things. So now we're at a point where I finally am able to really kind of step back and get back into the creative mode that I was in close to 10 years ago when I was developing these online courses, which was around 2012, 2011, 2013. I'm just going to grab my sweater because it's a little chilly in here. So bear with me here. I'm following my impulse because it is getting chillier. All right. Perfect. So, like I said, take notes. I've got really a lot of talking to do around the development of what we've been up to, how I see this as an important evolution, dare I say revolution, in the way that we teach and train somatic professionals. And even that word somatic for me it's missing the mark, because it's being used a lot right now for anything that involves movement, right? And this name, Scientuitive, I'm going to speak to that for a moment. This is something that came to me back in 1999-ish, 98, 97, when I was rehabbing one of my knee injuries. And then it got really solidified when I went and did my master's degree in Australia. And I was really in science geek mode, right? Researching, learning, had all the time in the world to read all sorts of books, which was amazing. And so Scientuitive is very much what it sounds like. The science, really the biology, the physiology, how this vessel of ours works, and then intuitive, hopefully it's obvious, intuition, the organic intelligence of our system, the body's capacity to know how to heal when we give it the right stuff. And many of you here are SmartBody SmartMind members, and you know that when you get the right information, the right practices, and you sequence these things, the body actually offers healing. Right now, it doesn't mean that we might not need a surgery like I did for my knees, or we need to maybe go get labs done or see various health professionals. And that might be one of the first things I really state here. And my beta students heard about this is there is a place and purpose for all healthcare professionals, providers, mind-body practitioners, doctors, nurses. There's all a purpose for all the folks who do healing and helping work. And one of the things I have really honed in on is trying to teach my students, of course, in this case, it would be SmartBody SmartMinders, 21 Dayers, and my recent beta people. When do you go and use that healthcare provider versus this healthcare provider? When do you maybe have to go see a doctor? Maybe when you need to not go see a doctor. I say that because what has gotten a lot of my work in trouble, and I don't mean but my predecessors, and I want to be very careful to say all the people I've learned with, I fully respect, glad I worked with everyone I did, glad I studied with many people. But one of the pitfalls I've seen is the dogma that comes in, at least with, say, Feldenkrais, is this is the only way. Only should we do Feldenkrais to heal the body, or only we should do somatic experiencing, or only chiropractic, or only this food diet thing. And as anybody knows, as you really get into working with the human body at this scientuitive level, we start to realize that each person needs different things at different times, right? So I wanted to start with that as just an overlay. Now, one thing that became very clear to me when I was in my SBSM development was, it's really important that we get these foundations on board first before we do Feldenkrais, for example. Now, I'm going to speak with more advanced terms. So for those who have not done SBSM, I'm not going to explain all these things. Okay, so I'm going to speak as though you've got, oh, and I can hear someone here. I'm going to just mute everybody again. So I'll be very, I'm not going to go basic. I'm going to be a bit more advanced, assuming that most of you have a little bit of knowledge about what I do and what Feldenkrais is, somatic experiencing, somatic practice. It was very clear when I got into developing SBSM and working with people, wow, we don't want to start with advanced neuroplasticity exercises. And I see some students and I see some noddings of heads. We don't want to start with meditation off the bat. We want to start with learning about, holy cow, I have this body, I have this stress physiology, and I can't even sense the world around me, right? When I went into my SE training, what wasn't clear then and is clear now, so hindsight, right? I had no idea in my beginning SE training that I was in functional freeze. Now, I'm sure there's some SE practitioners here. I'm looking at Carrie right now and one of my team members. And, you know, my sense is many of us who went into this somatic experiencing work or other work, say Feldenkrais, we had no idea what survival stress was, what stored procedural memories were, that it was important to titrate. We talked about going slow, but what did that actually mean? And again, I'm getting Carrie saying, yep, nope, it wasn't there. So again, I say that not to say that's a fault of those trainings. I want to be very clear. What I'm saying is we need to evolve how the base level trainings were created initially. Just like, and I'm going to use this example over and over again. I think most of us know what medicine is, medical doctor. What happens when you want to become a medical doctor? You have to have good grades. Yeah. You have to apply to medical school. You need to do pre-med. You have to pass pre-med. Then you get accepted to a medical school. You go through schooling where you're learning and watching. And then eventually, what happens? You are in a hospital. You're learning with other doctors. You're performing surgeries with other doctors around you. You're in practice. You're doing your rounds in all the different departments. Does that make sense that way? And then you're not necessarily graduated yet, right? You have to show proficiency, competence, understanding, and then you get the badge, the certificate, the degree that says you're a medical doctor. How I've seen the training so far is that there is not yet a way in which we say to someone, this is the pre-med. So I'm going to do a metaphor here. This is the pre-med tract. This is the first 2 years of learning. This is the residency where you're not, because imagine this, you guys. Imagine if a medical doctor had never seen a patient in a hospital and they're given the degree and then they're off in the world practicing surgery. It would never happen, right? It wouldn't happen. And so hold that thought, because the reason I use medicine is back in the day when medicine was first developed and taught, it wasn't perfect. And it still isn't perfect, but it had to evolve over time, over hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years. And now we're at a place where, you know, internal medicine is pretty good. You have a broken bone, you have a bleed, you have an accident, you need plastic surgery for something. There's some really good medical technology that's there. This world of somatic healing, mind-body, neuroplasticity work, we could say Feldenkrais, SE, somatic practice, all of this stuff is amazing. And we're still in that dark age time. We're still in that embryonic time of figuring out how to teach this stuff to people. The other thing that, again, some of you have heard this, but I'll repeat it for those new here. We don't have, you know, a medical textbook equivalent in our world. If you go to medical school or any school of profession, you have textbooks where they've been edited by many, many different scientists, experts, practitioners, clinicians, and I have books behind me, stacks, where it's a topic, it's a theme, and it's been edited by like 50 different people. we don't have that volume yet of work, research, academia in the somatic healing worlds. Hope you're following this. This is how I like to see big picture here. And that's okay, right? We are where we are at now because we're just starting to learn how to do this work. Thank goodness for the Peter Levines, the Bessel van der Kolks, the Kathy Kanes, the Pat Ogdens, the Freuds, the Jungs, all the people that came before us, because we're just a little more further ahead at understanding how do we work with the human body when there is survival stress that is stored, with all of the complexities that humans go through as in utero, little people to big people and all the things. It's complex. To me, it is like more complex in some ways than medicine, because sometimes what's going on isn't obvious, right? You have a broken bone, that's obvious. You have these things, it's obvious. But what we do know now in medicine is sometimes we have to go to a root cause. It's not as obvious. So I say all of this in a foundational entry point, if you will. My interest in running the Scientuitive Practitioner Track is to amalgamate all that I have learned into and I'm even finding it hard to find the words. It's a track, it's a training, it's an apprenticeship, it's a mentorship that brings in what I sense are the most essential pieces that I wish I had had at the beginning, such that we can speed up the process so that it doesn't take 15 to 18 years to become really solid at this work. I started Feldenkrais training in 2004. I don't know what the math is on that, but that's more than 10 years. I started learning science and the physiology of the body in 1993. I can do the math on that. That's 20 years, right? And so I think it's a lot of years. And so it is not feasible for many of you here who are adults to go into an embarking path of 15 years of study before you can become 30. Oh, it's 30 years. Oops, my mathematician caught me. Like 20 years seems a little low. Thank you, Mara. 30 years, I'm aging myself. 30 years, I've been in some form of post-secondary education. Thought 20 years seemed low. So it's not feasible for us to do that. Just like back in the day of medicine, you know, we didn't have set tracks for this is how you train a medical doctor. Now we do. So I wanted to start with this. For those 100% new to me, my background is in science, biomedical science, exercise physiology, health science, nutrition, Feldenkrais, which was a training that was 4 years long, 600 hours. So I'm giving this to you for context of the kind of training myself and many of my colleagues that are here who moderate for Team Lion have gone through. So 4 years of Feldenkrais training in person, nothing was online. We traveled and were in segments for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks away from home, sleeping in shitty hostels, you know, these sorts of things, the way students would do it. I can still remember the first hostel I stayed at in Victoria. So, you know, that was my first apprenticeship in the mind-body healing arts. The SE training, which I went through, and I'm so glad I did, also all in person. That training is 36 days in length. That's it. It's broken out over 3, we would call them levels: beginning, intermediate, and advanced. You would go for 4 days, 4 days and 4 days in person. And you would repeat that over sort of 3 levels. I'm simplifying it, but that was the SE training. I also studied a lot of master classes with Peter Levine. That's again where you go, you're in person for 6 to 7 days, learning from the teacher, watching demonstrations with your peers, doing self-study, practice. I also went through Kathy Kane's 2 main trainings. One of them she teaches solo called somatic practice. It's called the touch skills. It's so that you can work with your hands. For those in SBSM, you know, some of the lessons, what do? You take your hands, you put them on your diaphragm, your joints, your kidneys, your brainstem. That is where that was influenced from Kathy's touch training work. And then SRR, which is somatic resilience and regulation. That was another 3 levels of training in person over 4 to 5 days. I'm going to follow my notes so I don't lose track of things here. So I want to put that out there, and I haven't done the math, but I remember someone in our Feldenkrais training did a breakdown of how much finance went into a Feldenkrais training when you considered time away, all these things, and it was about $50,000 over 4 years. And that's being generous, or I would say not generous, but conservative. So I'm just putting that out there because I know a lot of people are asking, wanting to know how much is this going to be? And I'll just answer that right now. Right now, we are figuring out and tweaking the curriculum, how we see the year. And really, we haven't landed yet on exactly the costs for this first tract, which will be about 16 months in length. There will be breaks in that because, of course, we can't go for 16 months full. There'll be Christmas break, summer break, spring break, that kind of thing. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that the course is priced reasonably so that obviously those who would like to learn with me can, but also we have to cover expenses and all the things that happen when you facilitate a training. It is not just myself who will be teaching within the Scientuitive Practitioner Track. The first level will be co-taught with my husband, Seth Lyon, and the in-person live events will be co-taught with Elia Marak. Again, for those of you who've done SBSM, you know who Elia is. He and I have been co-teaching since 2016. Our workshop that involves movement, polyvagal games, Feldenkrais, more Eastern philosophies of Tai Chi, Qigong, really directed towards self-mastery, getting into our bodies, getting comfortable, being in group, being uncomfortable, being put on the spot, and really working with the physiology and the movement in that group setting. So it isn't just myself, it is Seth and Elia. For those that don't know Seth's background, of course, he's a somatic experiencing practitioner. He is also trained with Kathy Kane. He has a background in music and sound healing. And he has more of a, we could say, an interest in the shamanic practices, energy from that kind of naturalistic perspective that many of you in SPSM find as you get more regulated, you become a little more connected to that energy, that force around us that, you know, as they say in Star Wars, binds us all together. So that energy, that field, these are terms that I use a lot. The field, the matrix is what Kathy Kane uses to describe this connection to you, you know, this connection to our community, to humanity, to the earth, to the cosmos. I'm going to say right off the bat, I use these words. I'm comfortable using these words. I know that sometimes these words can not sit well with some folks, but I use them. So I'm just letting you know that while I'm not going to teach chakras, I believe in chakras. I believe in Eastern medicine. I believe in energy points and meridians, not my specialty. But again, part of what I think we're evolving towards is this ability to combine the West and the East, because there's good stuff on both, right? And humans, we're all the same in what our system wants. Our system wants safety, regulation, health, vitality. Okay. All right, I'm just going to make sure that I've covered certain things and I'll keep going. So This is a general objective, so I'm going to get really specific and read from my notes here. So the Scientuitive Practitioner Track, we're going to call it level 1. It's going to be about 16 months. We're planning on running this starting very late February, February 26th to be exact. And it will end the next year, June 2025. Okay. And the overall objective is to be able to do a competent first approximation session. It's a mouthful. To do a competent first approximation session with a person from the public in a way that you can just be with them, not put them into more activation or freeze. And if you do, how to bring them back to regulation. Now, I can see some people, Amy, one of our betas, she's smiling because this is true. This is, I'm being really honest, part of our practice. It's not about perfection. Part of our practice, when we start to get into this work, we will make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I've had Peter Levine make mistakes on me that were massive consequentially to my system. I've talked about this in SBSM and other things. Did I blame him? No. Right? Everybody is human and we lose track. But the key is, can one start to do a session one-on-one with someone in this scientuitive ethos and have that person come in a little more connection with themselves, a little more connection with the environment, a little more connection with whatever piece they're showing up wanting to work with. And if there's a little oopsies, do you have the skills and tools to bring them back and fix it? Okay. Or some of you might not want to do private work with people. Some of you might want to do group work. Maybe there's some people here who are yoga teachers or dance teachers, or you do something in person. Maybe you work with kids, right? One of our last beta students, she works in a school system, for example. So if you're going to do group or teach a guided class of nervous system basics, wherein folks can drop in, gain awareness, and leave wanting to do more inner awareness work. So if you're doing groups, again, at the end of this time, this first track, you can guide a nervous system oriented, scientuitive oriented class with whomever you're working with. Maybe it's a specialty group, maybe it's general public. You can leave them in a state of, I want to do more of this. I want to learn more. And here's the clincher with doing group work, catering to the whole group, because you're going to have people in groups that are all different levels, even if they're all there for the same purpose. And that's the secret sauce, is being able to teach a group of people who have different levels, but have them all come out at the end with a learning. The program, this track will be condensed, and you have to have SBSM under your belt. So one person had asked, let me just make sure I get this. I'm going to start tackling some of the questions as I move through the curriculum. One person asked, I would be interested in the program, but is it necessary and a prerequisite to have completed one of your courses before? So absolutely. You must have moved through all of SmartBody SmartMind's materials, not just the lessons, the neurosensory exercises, but the training calls, and have at least moved through one round of Q&A wherein Seth is guiding Q&A. In many ways, that would be the equivalent of some basic consult sessions where you're learning more theory, you're hearing questions from someone, not you, and you're starting to understand how to educate someone in this scientuitive way. This person asked, I've done a 3-month course in somatic experiencing on and offline, however, with another practitioner. So I'm not sure what the 3-month course is, because there's no, as far as I know, we cannot become trained in SE in 3 months. If someone's claiming that they're doing that, that's a no. So maybe this was a something else. I don't know. But the reason why it's important for all of our students, my students in this track, to have done SBSM is a few reasons. One, it shows you have some base level capacity, right? If you can only get through lab 1, you're not ready for this. If you can't sit through my training calls and take that in without needing to take a break, you're not ready for this. If you can't lie down on the floor and do one of my Feldenkraisian lessons in lab 10 and stay connected and present and interested, you're not ready for this. Now, if you do one of those lessons and all of a sudden you feel a little survival stress come out and you track it and you have to pause the lesson and you work with yourself and you bring yourself back to baseline regulation, then that's great. That doesn't, just because you had to stop the lesson doesn't mean you can't do the lesson. It means that you're following your impulse and working with yourself. So this is why we need that to be a prerequisite. Someone had asked in another question, how do you gauge if someone has actually gone through all the material? In other words, how do you use an honor system? And this is the one of the cases where it's an honor system. I'm going to believe you when you say that you've gone through all the material. And what will happen is that will show when we do our first module, our first Scientuitive Educator module. I will be able to know who has and who has not gone through the course curriculum and really gotten into their system. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be perfect. I was by no means perfect when I developed SBSM. I still had functional freeze in my system, all these things, but the ability to contain, stay connected, even when you have some activation or a little bit of freeze, that is the key. The other reason is I will use lingo like kidney adrenal, diaphragms, multitasking awareness, following impulse, certain terms that are indicative of the SBSM curriculum will roll over. Just like if I go back to medical school, if you haven't done your pre-med and you go to your first lab in pharmacology and you don't understand how to do a simple chemistry equation, for example, or something like that, it'll be found out pretty quickly that you didn't go through chemistry, right? Because you don't understand Ka values, all these things. If you've done medical school, you know what I'm talking about, right? So there's like a common language. And the reason why this is so important, and I cannot stress this enough, it allows the common denominator to be even. And then you can accelerate the learning. Again, within the trainings I was in for my own professional development, there was zero common denominator. And I could see how hard that was for the teacher and others in the course who were more advanced to wait as the basics got repeated over and over again, right? So again, this is true professional training. This is not just something that we're going to do that someone comes into for fun, right? Or for just learning, extra learning. This is like you're coming in because you want to do this as your work, as your career. You want to bring this into maybe the current existing work you're doing and at a higher level. So that's the other reason why, again, SBSM is a prerequisite. A lot of people ask about time zone. Okay, so we just ran 2 beta, and I'm going to explain what that is right now. So because I'm titrated and how I've been putting this together, we ran 2 cohorts. One was fall last year, 2022. One was winter, spring, 2023. And in those cohorts, we had people from North America, and we would say the European continent and the UK. We didn't accept anybody whom was in a time zone where they had to be up at 3 a.m. or stay up till 1 a.m. So in terms of Europe and North America, that will be okay, because we're going to have within this, the cohorts will be in the morning, so that it will be evening for the Euros and the UK people. But when we get into, say, the pod work, so you'll be doing some work with Seth, for example, we're going to have two time zones. One would be like 9 a.m. and one would be 3 p.m. So there'll be ways in which those from other countries can join. Of course, when we do the live and in person, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, when we do live and in-person work, that will require one to travel, but we are going to have it so that there's a cohort here in British Columbia and a cohort somewhere in the European side or the UK side, most likely first in the UK. And then if we find other venues that are central and affordable for us to rent, then we might shift to somewhere. But we're not gonna have this in the middle of Siberia or anything like that, where it's impossible to get to. We're gonna make it so that trains, planes, and automobiles can get to these places. So that is the answering of, I'm not in Vancouver. How about time zones? The live sessions, when you do work with us, they have to be attended in person. You can't, it is not allowed to take in the recording afterwards. So this is the other thing that's going to be very different from a lot of other online trainings that I'm seeing, is it's being allowed to take it in after the fact, but our live in-person trainings will require breakouts into groups online, you being put on the spot to teach something, answering questions, diving into personal experience. And that just cannot happen when you listen to the recording afterwards. It has to be in person, online, or in person, really in person. The other thing that won't be allowed, I'm going to be quite a stickler on this, because I saw this when I was in our trainings. People would come and they would only come for 2 days of the training. Oh, I can't make the second 2 days because I've got this other thing. We are going to give you notice of when the live trainings are, and I'll speak to those dates shortly. It really does disrupt the learning of the group when a couple people kind of leave at 12 o'clock on the last day because they got to catch their flight. That will not be allowed. It will be such that full attendance is required. Now, of course, if there is an absolute emergency, there's a death in the family, a child has an accident, then there are, of course, circumstances where you might need to leave. We get that. But with enough planning, the key is, I always recommend never travel on the final day of your training. You need to stay where we are and integrate. Because what occurred, and I saw this, people would rush into the trainings tired. They'd be exhausted for the Friday through Monday, because the trainings were usually always that long on a weekend. And then they'd leave and they wouldn't even have 2 hours to breathe and feel. And then they'd be back into their work schedule, taking care of kids, and nothing, it would integrate. So the difference in how we will run our lectures, we are not going to be sitting on Zoom from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. Hell no. I don't want to do that. I know nobody wants to do that. That's different when you're in person, right? Because you're moving, you're going for lunch, you're having breaks. But the Zoom online teachings will probably never go over 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours if we have a break. All right. So I hope that covers distance, time zones, mandatory to be in person. So one cannot go into this tract and say to me, I can't make those live. Can I just do the online? Hell no. The in-person is essential, just like you couldn't train a medical doctor only online how to do surgery. I know that seems really extreme, but in working with people one-on-one, what I've seen and what I'm seeing is, because so many people are being trained now online exclusively, they're missing that nuance and context that occurs when you are with a physical human being and you're feeling their energy. and you're in their field. Yes, I know we can also do that online, but there is something different when we come together and we teach in group and we practice in groups. So it's going to be very important. Okay. How's everyone doing? I'm going to take a little sip of water here. Yeah, someone said it doesn't extreme to me. It makes perfect sense. I think so. And here's the thing. I think we have really forgotten what in-school training is like because of the online world. And if I just go back to what I've been learning since 2004, I know I wouldn't be able to do what I did if it was only learned online. It'd be impossible. And I think we've been doing a disservice at having a lot of the trainings be either exclusively online, or the first segments are online and then you come together for a little bit. So yeah, it is very, very important. Okay, so here's how the basic 16 months is going to run. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. We'll see if I do it quickly because I want to get into some questions. So we're going to start with what's called the Scientuitive Educator module. So for those students here that did the beta with me, you're going to repeat that, potentially with some new folk, okay? Because it was beta, we were testing, and it's a good thing, right? Don't worry, we'll make sure you're compensated for that because you've already done the beta. So we will start module 1 end of February, the 26th, and we will go for 11 weeks to the week of May 6th. This will be a selection of lecture style sessions, group practice sessions, Q&A, and a wrap-up call. This curriculum is quite set because we've just tested it twice, and I think it was pretty fun and good. And it really was different than SmartBody SmartMind. If some of the beta here want to put in the chat what one sentence on how it was different, or feel free and I'll read that out so people on the recording can hear. But a lot of people came in thinking maybe that it was going to be like SPSM, and it was not. It was very different. It was interactive. It was get a little sweaty and nervous. I think a lot of people who were already very well trained in working with people couldn't believe how anxious and nervous they got when they were in a different situation. And so we have John said, this is again in reference to how the beta, I'll stop calling it, how the Scientuitive Educator module is different than SPSM. John said how to use the SPSM techniques when working with other people. Monique said the power of healing in community, and I'll add learning in community and being a little kind of clumsy in community. Lena, I really did integrate and went out of my comfort zone in working with strangers. Exactly. Amy, it was deeper in using it together as well as teaching it and using it in regard to other people. Yeah. So in this Scientuitive Educator module, it's about education. It's about how do you teach to others? Because the moment you teach to others and you get it, you understand it. Right? You might understand it in your body, but the moment you are teaching to someone else, that shifts it. The first module will also have some practicums where you will guide peers up here through a neurosensory exercise. It is a lot of fun. I always enjoyed the calls. They were super, for me at least, giving and nourishing, and it just showed what happens when we dive deeper. And I witnessed in both groups significant change in regulation to all the students. And we weren't even doing trauma work per se, right? There might have been things that came up, but it just showed when you have a slightly different context, it lifts the regulation and the capacity up. So we'll finish that. And then there'll be a break from about May 13th to June 2nd. Now also be aware, I'm saying some of these dates, but they might shift a tiny bit. We haven't fully nailed the specifics down, but this is a rough estimate. At the end of this SED module, one thing that I will reserve the right to is if I sense in that module that you might not be ready for the full next year and a bit, I'm going to say it. Okay. And it's not to be mean. It's because I want to make sure that you are ready to do the next level. And this was another thing that was a little tough in some of the other trainings I was in, is I could see people were kept in, even though maybe they shouldn't have been. Sometimes, it was suggested that they not continue, and that's great. But it's very important that we remain high in our common denominator so that we're all moving forward to get together. Okay. So we'll have a break in springish time, late spring, May 13th to June 2nd. Even though we have breaks, it is still your responsibility to live the work, to practice for yourself. One of the pieces that we did in the SED module was a self-care project. And this was something that actually a lot of folks had huge epiphanies with, benefits with. What it means was, or you had to, as you were in the module, and this will be true for the entire tract, the entire Scientuitive tract, self-care, self-mastery towards your physical body, exercise, eating well, getting your sleep dialed in, something that is in addition to your nervous system work, spiritual practice, or meditation work, if you do that. The reason why this is so important is when our physical body has more capacity aerobically, muscularly, we're eating well, we're fueling our body well, we're really listening to what the physical body needs, our ability to work with others skyrockets, because your capacity is bigger to hold all the stuff that your future client or groups might load onto you. And if your vessel is not sharp and in good working order, it will over time burn you out and break you down. Now, this doesn't mean you have to become Mr. Olympia or, a crazy fitness person, but general basic upkeep of your physical body, of how you feed yourself. And, if there's people who aren't sure what to focus on, that's where I'm there to help kind of pull that out a little bit. We had people, one person bought a treadmill because they knew that would make them work better and walk better. Some people were getting more into their sleep patterns. I remember one gentleman decided, I'm going to cook one whole meal a week and just be, very good with my food, not every night of the week. I think it was one meal. Some folks got some medical procedures done that they had been putting off due to fear, right? And so a lot of what occurred over this SUD module as this first module was just really good triumph over self-care and wanting to take care of the body. So that will maintain for the full time we're together. You'll document it. You're going to share with your peers what's going on, all those sorts of things. So after this break, we're going to go into what we'll call module 2. And that'll be from June 3rd to June 28th. So 4 weeks. This is going to be a practicum deep dive. Practicum deep dive and more practice. And so what'll happen is when you do your practicums, I will offer feedback, and then we might do them again. And we might do them again in class where you're guiding the group. And we offer feedback. I offer feedback. We pick apart what worked, what didn't work. All about, again, building up that capacity, that regulation, and that ability to connect. That's page 3. All right. Just make sure I'm on the right track here. Another thing that might happen in that zone in summer will be a little bit of discussion and mentorship around business, what everybody doesn't like to talk about, marketing, how to sell yourself. What is important to understand is that even if you have an SE certificate or a Feldenkrais certificate, because those are the things I have, even with my experience, if I were to go to a hospital or a school or a medical center and say, hey, I'm trained at this highest level in somatic experiencing and Feldenkrais, they'd be like, what? That most people don't understand what this work is. I know if you're in it, that's hard to believe. But what that means is, again, we're at that beginning embryonic stage where, thank goodness, people understand a bit more that trauma, working with trauma is important. Thank God we now have the ACE study. We have, again, the big grandfathers like the Gabor Mate's, Peter Levine's, Bessel Van, like those guys are actually helping it such that if we do go, someone might go, oh yeah, I kind of heard of that stuff, right? So where we are at now is light years ahead of where I was at in 2008 when I came out of my SE training, and people didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot stick because they're like, trauma? I don't have any trauma. So I want to make that distinction, is even though we're still just at the beginning of this, we're way further ahead than when we were in 2008 when I was done, not done, but finished my basic training, 2010, sorry. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what it takes to help people understand why doing this work is important. And that goes back to the Scientuitive Educator module. It's about educating people, about learning how to tell your story. Why are you doing this work? What got you into this work? These are the exercises that we will bring you through so that when you do show up at that conference, or you're in an elevator, or you decide to put up your shingle in a little office space somewhere, you can intelligently and with confidence and competency shift what you say based on who you're with. Because this is the other thing. You might have a perfect script of what this work is, what this work is, but if you can't attune and connect to the level that that person is at and shape shift into a different gear, you're just going to confuse them. So how you would speak to, say, a mom who has a kiddo with some troubles is very different than a yoga teacher who is interested in this stuff called neuroplasticity, right? And that is the other gift that I think I have figured out, is shifting and shifting based on who I'm around and who I'm with. And that's what I feel a good scientuitive practitioner would also be able to do, right? So speak high level, but also speak more layman term, but still offer the science. Okay. So where are we at? We're at June. July. Okay, that's done. Okay, so when we get to July, we're going to have a little break. So we'll have 4 weeks of that in June, and then a full month off in July. Again, this is where you keep up with your self-care. You review at your leisure. Nothing is formal, no formal assignments. But here's a hint. I can't think of a time when I was in my trainings where I wasn't studying something all the time in between segments. So this is the other difference between this kind of a format, and we're going to offer a little bit, but a lot of the trainings that I was in, there was never required reading. We were never tested on competency. There were no tests. There were no practicums, not in the SE training. So it is within the person who wants to really study to do the work in between the segments. This is where you might be like, oh, I haven't really read that book yet. I think I'm going to read it. I know that within our beta group, there was some folks that started a book group, a book club. We will definitely move through chapters of specific books, but that will be in class. When we have real break, it is up to you to do extra. You're not going to get a gold star if you do extra. That is on your own to do. just like nobody knew when I was studying the things I was studying in between segments, right? Practicing, whether you're practicing with yourself, your partner, a friend, maybe you already are a teacher of something, and you just start adding in little bits of nervous system lingo. Yeah. Getting people to sense themselves in a different way. I'm going to say very wholeheartedly and without a doubt, this I saw over and over and over again when I was assisting. This is important. This backs up what I've just said. When we would come back after break, so we would have a segment and then we'd come back 4 months, 3 months later, there would be questions. And there were many people that couldn't figure out how to apply what they had learned in the previous segment into their existing, say, psychotherapy practice. That was really telling to me. I kind of was like, okay, we just spent 4 days in this, say, SE training, learning tons of theory, all this stuff, and yet you couldn't figure out how to apply this to your practice. Now, this could be the fault of the way the training was run. It could also be that there wasn't enough encouragement to dabble, or it could just be that something wasn't embodied in that person. And this is what I think it was. Something wasn't embodied in that person, so it just naturally didn't flow out with them when they were in their practice. And that's what we don't want, right? This work isn't something that you do and then you stop when you go to the grocery store, right? This isn't something you just do when you're in practice, and then when you're with your husband or your wife or your kids, you stop thinking about it. This needs to roll over into everything in your life. And that is how you become really good at practicing and knowing what this work is. Okay. So even though you have break, you will find, I hope, ways to incorporate the work organically into your day-to-day. That's all I have to say about that. All right, module 3. Let's keep going. This will be August 5th to September 1st. This will also be 4 weeks. This is where you'll actually work with Seth, my husband, whom is also a practitioner. And what you will do in this 4-week module is you will have what we call pods with Seth. That is where you will come together with 4 of your peers, so you and 3 of your peers, and he will do a 15-minute piece of work with you while the other 3 observe and take notes and see what's going on from a nervous system perspective. At the end of the first 15 minutes, oh, and Seth's here, great. At the end of the 15 minutes, you'll discuss. So you're gonna, powwow with your friends, with your peers, with Seth, and you'll be like, oh, I noticed that, sorry, Selden, you're here, so I'm gonna pick on you. Selden got a little white. Oh, what does that mean? Oh, well, I think hand goes up. I think she was going into a bit of freeze, right? Or I noticed that there was a flushness opposite, but a sympathetic activation, right? So our ability to track what's happening in the person who's having the session, but also track what's happening in you and watch what Seth's doing. Some of the best ways to learn is to watch demonstration, but the key is that you watch them with curiosity, not with, oh my God, I could never do that. Oh my God, I could never do that, And so we want to really facilitate this ability for inquiry, curiosity, and learning while Seth is doing these sessions. This will be on Zoom. This will not be in person. So this is one situation where we're going to do that personal work on Zoom. And Seth is here, and maybe he can say a little bit. So what we're going to do is after you all go through that and you'll get one session, you will then analyze and watch other people's sessions. So we're going to record them, and then that will be your study. So it's not just going to be what you see in your group of 4, which again this is where Zoom is good, right? So now we're using the technology for the good, is we can record these sessions and see what's happening in all these different groups of people. Whereas in the classic SE model that I was born into, I had my experience with my group, but I didn't know what was going on in the other groups. So we're going to use that again, just like a teaching hospital, as a way to facilitate this deep learning while in session with Seth. I unmuted you, Seth. Are you wanting to say a little bit about the pods, and then I'll move on to the next segment?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Hi. Yeah, so I've been doing this thing called the pods for many years, on and off, which has been sort of running along with SBSM. And that's where I work actually with a group of 8 people, and I do 15 minutes each person. And that takes 2 hours. And so we had the thought of how cool that would be to turn that into a teaching vehicle. So yeah, this would just be 4 people, and we do 15 minutes of work. But then after each one, we have this debrief period. And it really is cool. I mean, one of the biggest ways that I learned, I know that Irene learned, and that many of our colleagues learned, the training was good, but some of the biggest stuff we got was from all the master classes we attended with Peter. I know Irene probably did like around 8. I think I did 4. And when you go to a master class and you get to watch Peter work with clients, and you sort of observe and take in almost by osmosis, it's about being connected to yourself while you're taking in what's happening. So there's a multidimensionality to that I think is really important. This is one of the things that's difficult to teach, is that it's not just about what you see, it's about what you feel in yourself as you're seeing what's happening. And that's what I think we could have an opportunity to do in these pod groups, is to do these little bits of work and then have this lovely debrief and like, okay, yeah, what were you noticing? What were you sensing in yourself during this experience, right? And all that becomes, I think, it can be this really beautiful, rich kind of learning container. So yeah, I think it'll be a really cool part of it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that piece, because it happened in little bits in our beta cohorts. And for those in the beta cohort, if I felt like something needed to be addressed in a debrief with one of the students, we would go in and do like a little piece of 5-minute work or 10-minute work. And again, it never happened. It's like, okay, today I'm going to do this many sessions with the group. It just, if it was clear someone needed a little guidance or support, we went into it. And that's the other thing, thanks Seth, is when we get really honed in and masterful at this work, we're not thinking, okay, now I'm going to do titration. Oh, maybe now I'm going to do a little coupling dynamic work. Oh, now I might do the VU, or now I'm going to, you don't want to be thinking that. You will be thinking that when you're in the learning at the beginning. But eventually what happens is, it's like, again, I always go back to medicine. It's like a really good surgeon. They're not looking at their textbook while they're operating, right? They're like in there doing the stuff, right? So that is really what we're wanting to do, is practice, 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 practice. I'm going to go on. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Seth? Or are you pretty good with that? Oh, asked to unmute.
Yeah, a really good point. This is something that I think takes time to build as we get into doing this work. Is very oftentimes it starts more logically and sort of it's more observation based, and you may have a thought about, I know this client is struggling with this, and so I'm going to support this for them. But really, like when the work really gets rich, all that kind of goes out the window, and you really are following your nose, so to speak. I mean, there's been times I've noticed with a client where like I'll start speaking a sentence, I don't know where that sentence is going to end. Like in the middle of speaking it, I'm literally following the path of what I'm feeling from them in the moment that much, and then it ends up being just the right thing. It really does become a process that's led by intuition, but it's kind of like with music. Before you can really improvise really well, you have to really learn all the scales and all the theory and all the stuff. And it's the same with this. You really have to learn and train and learn to operate from a logical, cognitive, it makes sense to support this because this is happening kind of place. And that's where you start. And then eventually it seems that morphs into this really beautiful, just, intuitive process. It's pretty cool.
It's like cooking. There's so many examples, right?
Yeah.
You're a really good cook when you don't need to follow a recipe, right? You just have what you have and you make it happen. Even with baking, you just know what you need to do and you just do it. And so we're essentially wanting to really get to this point of improvisation, as Seth said. But we start with the theory. And again, this is why SBSM is essential, is having that baseline foundation capacity and already ability to follow your own impulse. I would say 9.9 times out of 10, when I was in an assisting situation, things went sideways when the person did not follow their own impulse as the practicing practitioner, and they did what they thought their client maybe needed or wanted. Sometimes the client doesn't know what they want because they're dysregulated, right? They have a faulty sense of what is right and not right. And you, as the person who has more regulation capacity, feels something. You don't, and like Seth said, you don't know what it is, but it's like, I think there might be a need right now to just start feeling what's going on around your mouth. I'm just making this up, right? Oh, I never even considered that, but you as the practitioner, you will pick up on these essences as you hone in on your own body and having more mastery in your own body. That's the other reason why the pod work is important, is to still continue to do your own work, your own trauma healing work. Very, very important. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. So after we do that intensive with Seth in August, we will then go into our first public intensive. And the dates are not yet set. We thought we were going to run this in March and April. So the beta people know that I mentioned that, but we've decided there's too many of you that had conflicts. So we're going to start live and in person in September. Now we're going to have two cohorts, one in BC, British Columbia, most likely Vancouver, one again, most likely in the UK. We just found an amazing retreat center in the north of England called Broughton Sanctuary. It's live-in, all the stuff is there, and it's a beautiful space. So I think that's where we're going to be in the UK sometime in September. We hope to get dates soon. And so what is going to happen for this first public intensive, because there's going to be two. So again, this is September, October-ish, 2024. There will be an up and down workshop. So me and Elia are going to teach as we would always teach. The public will be there and you will be there as observers of what happens in a public workshop. You will still be a participant, but you're going to have your little notebook and you're going to take your own notes to notice like what happens when this happens, when that happens, and you'll immerse in it. So that's 3 days. You have a break of a day and a half, and then we stay on for another 3 days. And we do it again, but with our Scientuitive participants. So we will dive deeper into the exercises, into the explorations. We will do, this is where we do a lot of the polyvagal practices, a lot of the polyvagal games that Elia is an expert at. And you will laugh your head off, and it'll be very social engagement based, and it'll be a lot of fun. Okay. So it'll be kind of a party in a way, but a good kind of learning party. Someone had mentioned about the Broughton Sanctuary looking amazing. Yeah, it's higher priced, but we're going to keep it even for you guys. So this is a part of the pricing that I do know we're going to do. The cost for someone in North America or Europe, we're going to try to keep pretty much exactly the same. So even if our location here is, or there is higher price, I will absorb that cost. I will subsidize that cost, so it's the same. So this is basically what we have to do, right? Because we need it to be completely even so that the exchange rate and the currencies are about the same. So that is something I've decided to do so that we can find venues that work for what we need. And sometimes some venues are just higher in price point. So that'll be, of course, you have to get there, right? So you have to travel to that workshop space, but I am doing my best to subsidize the offset of higher priced venues. So that is definitely on my mind, Magda. I've seen that. So we'll do that in the fall or really late summer. While that's happening, so of course there'll be a Euro cohort and a North American cohort. While you are not in session live, you will be still doing some work. You will be unpacking the pod stuff that you did with Seth. Okay. So even though you're not in public workshop because your other cohort is, you will still be working on your stuff, the pod stuff. Okay, we're into November now. This is where it gets fun. You're going to do a practicum with a public person. So how we find these people in the public, we'll have some ways of doing that. You might have a community of people that you want to work with, and maybe they're interested in being your guinea pig at no fee, right? You will do a session one-on-one using what you have learned up until then, this scientuitive way, the scientuitive ethos. And in that public one-on-one, this is one person you're working with, you will record it. So this could be on Zoom, or if it's in person, you'll need to set up your little camera and, record it the way people do in psychotherapy practicums. That's what they do. 15 to 30 minutes. Submit to 2 of them. You'll need to do 2 because 1 is never enough, right? Sometimes you need a second one to either challenge yourself or maybe redeem yourself a little bit. Sometimes the first one's like, totally crashed and burned that. It's like, that's okay. Let's do another one. This is the other thing I will give Peter full respect for. Any masterclass you go to, usually the first thing he says is, I want everybody to make at least 20 mistakes this weekend. Make mistakes. You have, not to your detriment, but test it. You're in a teaching environment, therefore test the boundaries a little bit. So that practicum will be recorded, you'll submit it, and then Seth and I will review those, and you'll get the feedback in December. In December, we're going to do the first 2 weeks with Q&A consult. We will take your questions. It's kind of that end of year energy anyway. So we'll kind of do cleanup. We need to cover something from the up and down workshop. Do we need to cover something from the pod, from the SED module? We'll just kind of do like a wrap up Q&A consults in December. We'll take the 16th of December to January 5th off for break. So this at the end of December, that's 10 months. January. Okay. This will be where we do more practicum, but it will be online. So the beauty of where we're at right now, where I'm at, is that we have lots of people who want to do group work with me. They want to do drop-in class, but some people cannot afford the classes. So we are going to do no fee clinic where we will book sessions on Zoom where public can come in and you guys will teach. One person will teach. And the logistics will have to be figured out, but of course peers will be invited. And let's say I'm looking at Amy, one of our beta students. Amy, it's her turn to teach 15 minutes to 120 people. Go for it, Amy. But I'll be here, or Seth will be here in case you get a little into trouble, if you're not sure, and that will be open. Just like if you were in the hospital arena and you don't know how to close that suture on that thing, you're going to ask your physician beside you, you're attending, like, I'm not so sure how to do this. And that person might come in and take over, or they might suggest something. And the people there who are the public will have accepted that they are there in a teaching arena with people learning. Okay. So that one really excites me, because when you're in that zone where you can't hear anybody and you just see this sea of people staring at you, and you're trying to teach a neurosensory exercise, you might be like, what the heck am I supposed to do? But what do? You go back to your own body. You look, oh, that person's smiling. Oh, that person has a dog. Cool. That person's writing a note. Maybe don't take notes right now. We're gonna cinch the feet on the floor, right? And so that's how you interact with public who you've had no contact with and you don't know their history at all, right? So that'll be January. It's going to be really fun, I think. And if this kind of scares you, that's okay, right? It's okay. A little bit of fear is good, right? We don't want it to scare you to the point where you shut down and can't speak. But we could work with that if that happens, right? Because these are natural things that come out when we put ourselves into new territory. So that's January. All right, so the next few segments are a bit more, I don't want to say open-ended, but depending on where we've gotten to with everybody by this point in time, we will adjust, tweak. We will definitely do another pod with Seth somewhere between February to March. We're going to probably do more peer-to-peer practice, obviously more self-care work. We're going to practice what I call, again, SED work, Scientuitive Educator work. So this is where we're going to harvest questions from the tens of thousands of YouTube comments I get, from SBSM questions, from 21-day questions. We're going to harvest them and put them on a doc away from those platforms. And your job within this kind of February to mid-March, April, is to answer them and to study the question and write the question out. And then you bring that question to us, you bring it to your peers, and you do good old-fashioned study work, right? Remember back in the day in school, you had to take a paragraph and talk about what it meant. So this is a little bit more structured in that someone might ask, I'm in chronic freeze, help, I don't know what to do, right? We know what you might do, but what would you say to someone from the public, right? So that'll also happen in this early part of 2025. Throughout the entire year, we will constantly refer to what I'm calling general themes work. What this means is the big concepts that have been learned and shared across the two dozens of years throughout all these different somatic methodologies. Concepts like pendulation, titration, coupling dynamics, shock trauma, early trauma, working with shame, disgust, translating somatic experience into different senses. Peter would call this the SciBAM analogy. This is not a complete list, but these are theoretical components that have kind of become common lingo in our somatic trauma nervous system healing world that are important to understand. And so we're not just going to sit you down in 1 week and say, okay, learn these and memorize, right? Obviously, we know what titration is, so we're going to keep working with that. Coupling dynamics, that's a little trickier, right? So we will infuse that and start working with that probably when Seth is working with the pods, and then when we're in-person live workshop working with the body, we'll work with coupling dynamics as an example. But the biggest one is connection. The biggest theme of all of this work is connection. It's not about getting someone into their body. Listen to this very carefully. This work is not about getting someone into their body. We want that, but it might be that that's the last place they want to go. So you're just going to talk about their grandchildren. And as you talk about their grandchildren with them, because that's the first thing that they can think of that's a positive resource, you might get them to sense what happens with their breath. Or what's it like to look out to the trees as you think about your grandchildren? Or what do you notice your shoulders do? as opposed to, I need you to tell me what's happening in your body right now. Right. And I've seen that mistakes in somatic trainings where the person thinks the work, because it's called somatic experiencing, we got to get into the body, get into the body. Eventually, maybe, but it's about connecting and attuning, just like you would not work if you have a newborn baby. You're not worried about making sure that baby can talk and walk. You're connecting, you're attuning, you're giving them co-regulation so that they can learn how to become the capacities to talk and walk. But it's not about, we're going to get this figured out right now. So I get a little heated with that because these are the little mistakes I see. And by the way, mistakes will be pointed out. This is something not allowed in the SE training. This is why I had to stop assisting. I was never allowed to point out if someone was really doing something not right. I didn't think that was right. I thought there's a way to bring a mistake up in a way that's respectful and firm, because how are we going to learn, right? If we aren't pointed out, that actually wasn't the way you should have taken that person. And so, we'll learn how to do that. We'll learn how to teach you guys to interact with your peers in a way that also can offer critical critique, but in a way that's in service of learning, right? Seth, do you have anything to add to that? Oh, shoot. Right. You're not co-host.
You have to give me permission every time.
Yes.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest things that I really saw missing in the SE training. It's much more emphasized in Kathy's trainings. And again, this is why, what we're really wanting to create here is something that it's not just a substitute for SE training. It's something that brings in all that Irene has learned over 20 plus years and that I have learned over 20 plus years. And that it's about bringing in many, many different understandings into one cohesive model. And one of the foundation of that is it's about attuning to your client and meeting them where they're at, connecting with them. I mean, I've had whole sessions many, many times with people, especially towards the beginning. It's just conversation. And during that conversation, there is co-regulation going on. It's invisible. It's something that it's just happening in the way in which I'm paying attention to them and listening. And there's no obvious somatic work, being done, and yet it's happening because it's about that quality of attention. So it's such a important concept that sometimes gets taught and sometimes does not. I saw a little something pop up in the chat that in their SE training they were allowed to get feedback. Cool.
Yeah, that's true. We could give feedback too, but usually I wanted to say and again, maybe other trainers do this differently, but the feedback had to always be positive.
Yeah, that's what I've seen the most too. Is it was only positive feedback that was allowed, not critical feedback. And maybe there is variability to that, and so that's great. But yeah, that's really, really important, I think, is that there is critical feedback. So that it's just, we need to know, like, oh, yep, there was another option there I could have chosen. And, oh, I missed that, right? And it's same as in any other kind of learning. Like in med school, you're not going to get through med school only getting positive feedback, right? It's like, nope, they're going to tell you when you do something wrong because it'll put at risk. It's the same with this work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
cool. Cool. Yeah. And someone said constructive feedback. Yeah, it could be constructive, but listen, guys, if you do something that is blatantly wrong, and not because you're trying to do it wrong, because you just didn't know, that's okay. And we're just going to be like, this comes down to that healthy shame piece. Yeah. So this comes back to some of our own work that we might need to do. Because sometimes I make mistakes. I was like, oh, damn. Oops. Okay. I get it. Let's make that better. So sometimes it has to be, right? It has to be quite direct. That's how kids learn. That's how toddlers learn. You can't be soft with a voice and say, oh, honey, don't touch that hot stove. You're going to hurt yourself. It has to be, don't touch that hot stove. It has to elicit a response, of course, with respect and kindness and empathy. But we're at a different playing field here. Okay. Right. So this isn't about, I'm not trying to make friends. I want to be colleagues with you, but I'm not here for you to like me necessarily when we're in this. Like, I want to challenge you and respect where you're at. And, you know, I've had to call out some uncomfortable things as I've watched some of the practicums. And it's a risk for me to say, hey, you might not want to do this because this blah, blah, blah. Right. And that's been an edge that I've been working with. But here's the thing, every time I've offered that kind of critical feedback, the person who can take it in, they show up and you can tell that they've shifted that and it's made all the difference in the world. So, yeah. Okay. Second public intensive will happen somewhere April, May 2025. Again, we'll have something in British Columbia, something in Europe or the UK, dates to be announced. This is still 100%, not 100% dialed in, but my sense is we will figure out a way to do another low fee concept. It won't be just a repeat of up and down, although there's benefit to doing that. Trust me, we might have those teaching elements, have some movement teaching in the body, covering the principles, the foundations of this work, but you will then be interacting with the public and guiding them through group and fun game stuff. It's hard for me to describe it. Those that have been to up and down, you know how crazy these things are, but they really work when you are in a group. And that will be a way to just get you comfortable in a big group setting and teaching. Now, someone might say, but Irene, I don't want to teach groups. I get it. But this, again, will be part of a way to build your capacity, your confidence, and your competency. And what always happens when we're in these group workshops, participants have questions, always. And we sit in a circle and they ask questions, and always it's either me or Elia answering those questions. So we're going to be lazy and you will answer those questions for the public. And this is another way that we can have a public workshop that is, in this case, it could not be free. It would have to be low fee because, of course, we have to cover costs. So that's the second public workshop. Again, within that time zone might be when you are reviewing your second pod with Seth. And then after that one, we're going to go right into, in May, another practicum where you do the same thing you did in November, where you are essentially doing a session with someone, working with someone. And again, that could be on Zoom or in person. Again, because we have access to many people interested in this work. Again, we might have a call out to my list and followers and say, hey, we're in this professional training right now. Would you like to volunteer to be a subject, a client for someone in training? And so that is one way that we might help you find people. Because even sometimes if you have a friend or a family member, it's not the same. There's something about having someone you work with who you've never met, ever. Right? Because then you really have to put your spidey senses to work because you don't know anything about them other than maybe a little bit of history. All right. And then the final module will kind of wrap up in June. We'll do reviews of those practicums. At this point, you know, we'll just really, I think, come together and reflect on what we've learned. And I think it'll be a lot over this 12+ month period. And then let's say, you know, move through that. And maybe for some of you, that's all you need. You don't need any more. Or for some of you, you might want to go further. And this is where, and again, there's no details on this other than the second level, the second track would be to work hands-on with someone, physical touch, movement, trauma work, deeper working with early developmental trauma, anesthesia trauma, all the things that, of course, myself, Seth, and most of our colleagues here know how to do. So that will be kind of the next level, which we won't get into. So I know there's some questions that have been submitted. I'm just going to review these things that I have. I'm going to see, I know we've gone already an hour and a half, but I'm going to stay on and answer as much as I can. Seth, I don't know if you're able to hang out, but if there's anything that comes into the chat, maybe you can work with that. Is there anything you would like to add, Seth, as someone who's kind of been watching this journey, who's been in the trainings, and who's going to be a part of this Scientuitive tract?
Well, I'm just excited about the whole possibility. And this is something we've been dreaming up and planning and talking about for years and years. And so it's really exciting to see it starting to come into a shape. It's very it's so complex putting something like this together. And it's something that we really are taking a lot of care with. You know, I think that's why Irene did 2 beta groups, is she wanted to test the waters and like, well, does this work? Does this not work? So I feel really confident and excited about just what's being shaped here. It feels like it's the start of the next chapter, you know, for us and for the world in general, is, you know, just creating really, really solid practitioners. It's so needed.
Mhm.
So it's quite exciting to me. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so someone asked, I'm a certified SEP already. What will your training add? I wish I could answer that directly. And there's a few others here that have a lot of training and SE and in body mind centering and Rolfing and other things. And, you know, the thing that is tough to quantify is, when is our training ever done? When is our learning ever completely done? For some of you who are already certified in something where you are working with people, you might intuitively feel like, this is all I need. I know I'm doing good work. This is enough. For others, you might want to just keep adding and adding and adding to your repertoire because you're just thirsty for as much knowledge as possible. That was me. I just kept going and going and going. I'm going to read something because this is a comment that came in from an SBSMer who, when she started SBSM, and she shared her story many times on my site and such. Her name is Naomi Galinsky. And Naomi, if you're here, say hello. But she started SBSM with fibromyalgia, very unwell, very sick, healed that, and then began her SE training. So I'm going to read this. She said, "Hi, Irene. I feel called to share how I recently dropped into a layer of embodied knowing. I've only completed the SE beginning. So this is just the first, would be 12 days, I think, of training. But because I've studied and practiced the material with you for 6 years, and she means SBSM, when I do somatic work with clients, I intuitively know how to ride them through the activation and the deactivation cycle. I intuitively know when to titrate, when to pendulate, when to slow things down. And I'm starting to feel the field of resonance from clients. I can do trauma renegotiation. I could do trauma renegotiation even before I completed my SE training. It's not coming from my mind, it's embodied. This is so cool. And I'm starting to notice how other healers and body workers and therapists are not regulated and can't do what I can do. I'm just starting my private practice and I'm super excited about this." So I wanted to read this from Naomi because we are only as good at what we do based on our level of regulation. What most of the trainings that are professional don't offer is the time to work on yourself. So this is where SBSM is essential. And I know many people have not done SBSM yet. And so that is essential that you do. But even when we've done SBSM, and let's say we have done an SE training, or we've done some sensory motor work with Pat Ogden's work, or NARM, or some of the other many trainings that are out there, those are wonderful. But typically the focus is on learning skill, theory, and practices for the client. And a big part of what we want to keep doing is bringing it into our own body, back into our own body. So to answer the question, will this help me if I'm already an SEP? I can't answer that, but I will say it will offer you a deeper dive into your own mastery and working with more people, your peers and public, in a way that, from what I've seen, hasn't happened in that SE model. Again, that's fine, that's their model, but something happens when you start working constantly in practice with more people, different environments. You do become kind of that ER doctor, right? That can take anything that comes through the door, like, okay, we got to do this, we got to do this. That's what a really good practitioner can do. So it really depends on how much you want to expand your vocabulary. If you have the time, I'll answer the question about time. Some people have asked, how much time will I need for this? On any given week, with the exception of when we're in person, because when we're in person, that's all day, right? For about 10 or so days with some break in between. As I said at the beginning, I would not run a Zoom call more than 2-ish hours, because we're coming up to 2 hours here, and I'm like it's time to take a break, right? We need to move away from the computer, and that's what we need to listen to. So in person, whether it's on Zoom, let's say 2 hours a week, but then the self-study you need to accommodate for. I'm going to say roughly 5 hours extra a week. How you split that up over your week is up to you. The one thing I want to get away from is cramming on the last day before the next class. So this is where titration is so important, because in order to take in the theory, you have to be embodied. And I think this is why a lot of the concepts that get taught in that SE training module, for those who are still struggling with their dysregulation and dissociation and freeze and activation, they're not getting most of what's coming in, because by 12 o'clock, their brain is done, right? And so we need to make sure that your brain and your cognitive faculties aren't getting worn out. And so this is where spreading out the learning over the week will be really important. Depending on what we're in, when you might, in addition to a 2-hour lecture on Zoom, you might need to meet up with a peer and do a little exercise. We call it field work. You might need to go out into the park and hang out with a tree. This was what we did last round. For some people, that was weird. I'm like, well, great. You're feeling weird hanging out with a tree. Nothing wrong with that. Imagine what it's like when you're hanging out with a stranger you've never met and you got to do trauma work with them. That's pretty weird too, right? So there's these little exercises that we're going to put in that seem really simple, but they can go quite deep. So I just said about 5 hours, give or take. And again, if you're wanting to devour books and read, then that might take more time, and that's in your own time. Let's see here. Someone asked, will only the people who did the beta module be considered for the Scientuitive Practitioner Track? Most likely no. So it depends on how many of them want to continue, because we are looking for 12 and 12 people on the North American side, 12 people on the Euro UK side. As we know, with any course, attrition occurs, life changes, people have babies, people need to stop, life circumstances. So, we might look at starting with a few more than 12 on each side, but we also have to accommodate our time to do this one-on-one work. In the case with Seth, or in the case of being in a public workshop, we still need public people as well as students. So that is still to be determined. But yes, the beta folk will get first dibs. But I hope to bring in some new folk into this first SED module. And then you might be wondering, Irene, do I have to commit to the full year? And really, we want to know that you can. And though there will be an application process for the beta people and the newbies. So again, we're being very, very stringent in ensuring people are able to commit, they want to commit, and they're doing this for the right reasons, not just to hang out and have a nice experience for a year and a half. It really is because you want to do this work with people in the public, contributing to that. Okay. There will not be any scholarships at this point in time. We just are not able to accommodate that with our expenses and administration and venues and all of that. Someone mentioned I'm still recovering from long COVID and chronic fatigue, therefore not in full capacity. Could I still do the training? My immediate answer to that is not yet. It's very important that you have the capacity to have what's the word I'm looking for? Stamina that isn't overriding, right? If you have been able to hang out on this call for almost 2 hours and you're still feeling okay, then you've got some stamina, right? If you had to stop at 10 minutes or 30 minutes because there was too much information coming at you, then I would say your capacity isn't ready yet for this level of professional training, and that's okay, right? You have to know and understand what your system has capacity for and not. And as I read Naomi's story, she did SBSM work for 6 years before she entered into becoming trained to do this work. And I know that seems like a long time, but in the grand scheme, it is not, especially when we're earlier in our careers. So that's just kind of what it takes. I've answered that one. I'm pretty sure I answered yes. You have to be able to attend the live sessions. The other thing is, we're at a point right now, one of the questions is am I going to run this again in 2025? No, because we'll still be in this in 2025. Pending interest, we may start a cohort in the SED module at some point in 2025, but I also need to take a break from time to time. And I'm at that point that, say, Peter was at in the early 80s, where he had no helpers, not a lot of people to, come in and teach and co-teach. It was just him. And so at this point, we don't have many trainings that a person could slip into if they miss a live workshop. So again, this is where it is important that when we get you the dates, that those are blocked off. And of course, if there's an emergency, that happens, but very important to stay healthy and well so that you can attend in person and have the capacity to do that. Is this available in Australia online? So the Aussies that are here, we had one person who was in South America during this. I can't remember the time it was for them. But as I mentioned, I really don't want people having to attend in online Zoom sessions when it's 3 a.m. It's just not good for your health to be online when you should be sleeping. So this is where, we're going to maybe try to make the North American call earlier and the North American call later in the day. So that might be able to accommodate an Aussie here or there, and the European one much earlier in the day. So we're going to have to figure that out. And I will apologize to the Aussies and the Kiwis. It always takes us a little longer to get there, right? It took years before the SE trainings were in Australia. It took years before Kathy was able to come to Australia to teach. And this is the thing with this work. We don't have institutions all around the world teaching this yet, right? So we're kind of at that beginning stage. Already answered that. Someone asked, when you said Naomi did SBSM work for 6 years, does that mean she did a few rounds of SBSM over a few years? I don't know the answer. My sense is she just kept doing it. over and over and over again. She might have been in process when we did the rounds, but this goes back to what I said. Remember what I said when I was in my SE trainings assisting? Those who did well didn't just study it when they were in training. They were studying it when they weren't in training, when they were just in their general lives. And so it's very important to see SBSM not as something you just do when we're live. If you are someone who forgets about it completely when we're not in live session, then this might not be the work for you, because that means it's not infusing into your life. So again, it's less about how many rounds a person has done of SBSM. It's about how they're doing the work constantly all the time in little bits that's organic, or working with the lessons weekly. So someone did ask this somewhere here, and this might be a good one to end on. Will I be able to do a normal job? Or in this person's case, it looks like attend other school. I can't answer that for you because you know your capacity, but I'm going to say right now, I've been trying to participate in an online course that is not my own. And I'm finding it hard to keep up with those calls because I can't override anymore. I can't stay up till 1 in the morning or even 10 at night watching a training call on my computer. And that's tough because I used to be able to do that stuff. So the thing you'll notice is as you become more regulated, you will be less inclined to cram stuff into your week because you need time for self-care, right? So if in this current world of yours, you don't even have time for an hour of exercise a day, okay, that might mean something has to shift so that you can make room for 5-7 hours of training a week, plus adding self-care to your agenda. And I know for some of us, you know, if we're fully immersed in a job looking after kids, it could be tricky and difficult. So it comes down to priority, capacity. Back in the day, people did their school typically when they had no kids, when they had no big responsibilities. They were in their 20s, right? Mom and dad maybe were paying, or there was a loan. And this, so I understand this is a little different, but you will need some extra time so that you're not missing things and you're not cramming into the wee hours of the night. So definitely there'll need to be a little shift in how you live and work, how you might get support. However you do that, if you do have kids to raise, how that might work. Yeah. And someone asked, do you know when we'll be doing more of the advanced work around developmental trauma and shock trauma? This will be level 2, and level 2 will be more in person. It will not follow a strict curriculum like what I just outlined. There will be more coming together in person, working one-on-one with touch. And I will say a lot of the early trauma and shock trauma stuff, it naturally pops up, right? It naturally comes to life when we're doing this work anyway. We just won't be structured in teaching you how to work with that. Okay. Yeah, we don't have, so maybe this is what I end on. Got some questions coming into the chat. People are wondering what the approximate cost will be. We're still figuring that out, but to give you an idea, and Seth just put this in the chat, to do an SE training, and this does not include private sessions, which you must do, and many consultations, which you must do to get your certificate. A basic SE training, this is no master classes with Peter. This is no Kathy Kane. None of that, is about 10,000 US. That's for 36 days of training. 36 days over 2.5 years. So you can kind of see what we're putting together is a little more comprehensive than 36 days and a few sessions here and there. So we will have these things figured out soon. For hours, yes, there will be a full price, but there will also be installments. There's no way I know people could pay upfront tuition for an entire 18, 16 months. So that it will be such that you can definitely pay in installments when that happens. I think I have talked enough. And as I said, this is new for us, and it's not. I have been going to trainings, assisting at trainings, holding trainings. As some of you don't know, but workshops and running workshops is all I did in my first years as private practice as a Feldenkrais practitioner and somatic experiencing practitioner. So that part is very exciting to get back into live workshopping with everyone. And then really, how can we develop this new evolution, this new mastery of a practitioner that isn't just somatic and isn't just therapy or trauma, but is this scientuitive practitioner lens? One person had asked, will this be recognized by governing bodies? No, because at this point, I am my own, this is me, and bringing in all these different pieces. If you've done SBSM, you understand the power that that has. Therefore, just imagine that kind of at another level. Obviously, we will give you a piece of paper that says how many hours, who you studied with, what you got. We'll have a full curriculum there. But just like when I graduated from SE, never did someone ask for my papers. Nobody ever asked for what I had studied. Maybe they should have, but they didn't. And I think it comes down to this new world is really about deep mentorship, apprenticeship, and knowing you've got the goods and you've got the competency and the confidence to work with another human being and help them, right? Just because you have a certification does not necessarily mean you have competence and confidence. Of course, both are great. But at the end of the day, it's about the ability to practice and do this work with others with skill and mastery, and a desire to continue to learn and add to your skill set as the years go on. So thank you everybody for being here for 2 hours. For those who have stuck with me live, we still have 98 people here. And for those who've listened to the recording or watched, thank you for hanging out for 2 hours. Thanks, Seth, for coming in. Thanks, Bonnie, for any links and all the pieces you've put into the chat. Thank you to all of the beta people. I see a lot of you who've come in and showed up to listen to this next level. And all of those who are new here who haven't done SBSM, I really recommend it, whether you continue with me in this fashion, scientuitive fashion, or just for your own self-development. It really will be a way to get you to that next level of regulation. And for those in SBSM right now, just keep working through it, keep working through it. And if all goes as planned, I intend to be here for a little longer, and hopefully we just keep running more trainings and more trainings. So thanks everyone. Bye.